Putin's planes breached the EU border. MiGs in NATO airspace. The Kremlin has crossed the red line. Trump threatened Russia. This could explode into serious problems. A historic step. For the first time in 34 years, Estonia has stood up to Russia. NATO is on high alert. The Kremlin is rattling its nuclear weapons right under NATO's nose. Iskanders are already at the borders. The EU is arming itself to the teeth. I'll share all the details in just a moment. Greetings. This is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. Russian MiG-31s have violated Estonian airspace. As noted by the country's Ministry of Defense, the violation occurred over the Gulf of Finland. The Russian fighter jets flew parallel to the state border from east to west and then entered the airspace to a depth of less than 10 kilometers. The ministry published a map showing how the Russian MiG-31 aircraft intruded into Estonian territory. A corresponding post appeared on the social network X.
The map shows the flight path of 3 Russian MiG-31s that violated Estonian airspace near the island of Vainla on September 19th.
It was clarified there that the aircraft were in Estonian airspace for almost 12 minutes without radio communication, and that NATO F-35 fighters patrolling Baltic airspace had to respond to this incident. As usual, the authorities there snapped back, claiming it was a scheduled flight over the Baltic Sea.
On September 19th, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets made a scheduled flight from Karelia to an airfield in the Kaliningrad region. The flight was conducted in strict accordance with international rules for the use of airspace, without violating the borders of other states, as confirmed by objective monitoring systems. During the flight, the Russian aircraft did not deviate from the agreed air route and did not violate Estonian airspace. The flight path ran over the neutral waters of the Baltic Sea at a distance of more than 3 kilometers from the island of Vainla.
Notably, US President Donald Trump responded to the incident with the Russian aircraft over Estonia and expressed his dissatisfaction.
I'll need to look into it. I'll be briefed soon. But I don't like it. I don't like it when things like this happen. This could turn into serious problems.
The head of European diplomacy, Kaja Kallas, also condemned the violation, emphasizing that it constitutes an extremely dangerous provocation.
Today's violation of Estonian airspace by Russian military aircraft is an extremely dangerous provocation. This is already the 3rd such violation of EU airspace in just a few days, further escalating tensions in the region. The EU stands in full solidarity with Estonia.
For his part, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the incursion of Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace unacceptable and systematic. Part of Russia's campaign against Europe, NATO, and the West.
Russian destabilization is expanding to new countries and directions. They are using every tool at their disposal, from interfering in political processes, as in Romania and Moldova, to violating airspace, as in Poland, Romania, and now Estonia. This is not a coincidence. This is a systematic Russian campaign against Europe, against NATO, against the West. And it requires a systematic response. Strong actions are needed, both joint and from each individual country.
Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha stated that Russia must face overwhelming political and economic pressure after Russian fighter jets violated Estonian airspace.
The incursion of 3 Russian fighter jets into Estonian airspace is yet another escalation of the conflict by Russia and a direct threat to transatlantic security. Ukraine stands with Estonia in the face of Russia's reckless intimidation. Half measures are no longer enough. Russia must face overwhelming political and economic pressure. Until there is a truly strong response, Moscow will only become more confident and aggressive. It is time to put an end to Putin's sense of impunity.
A historic step. For the first time in 34 years, Estonia is convening without the UN due to the violation of its airspace by Russian aircraft. According to Estonia's Foreign Minister Margus Tsahkna, on September 19th, 3 armed Russian fighter jets violated the country's territorial integrity and the principle of the UN Charter, which prohibits threats.
Or the comprehensive use, practical application, effective implementation, and strategic utilization of these various methods, techniques, procedures, and approaches. Of overwhelming military force. Meanwhile, the sovereign nation of Ukraine
plans to join the UN Security Council meeting regarding Russian fighter jets over Estonia. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Sybiha stated that our country has approached the Republic of Korea, which currently chairs the Security Council, with a request to participate in the meeting and present its position on the incident.
For the first time in 34 years, Estonia has requested the convening of an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council. This demonstrates the unprecedented scale of threats that aggressive Russia poses to the stability of Europe. Ukraine has approached the presidency of the Republic of Korea with a request to participate in the meeting and present its point of view. We support our friendly Estonia in its calls for a decisive and united response to Russia's ongoing destabilization of international peace and security.
Let me remind you that NATO has previously scrambled fighter jets in response to Russia's actions. In particular, one drone violated Romanian airspace. A Romanian F-16 tracked it for about an hour but did not shoot it down, and the drone returned to Ukraine. However, Polish fighter jets did have to respond to Russian Shahed drones that violated the country's airspace on September 10, 2025. Poland has openly stated that this was not an accident but part of systematic actions by the Russian military. The Kremlin is testing the defenses of Poland and all of NATO, using drones as an element of hybrid warfare.
Our airspace has been repeatedly violated by objects such as drones. The operation to detect and neutralize targets is ongoing. Social media is flooded with videos. Local residents report drones flying over Warsaw and Krakow. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that the military used weapons against enemy targets.
The operation related to the repeated violation of Polish airspace is ongoing. The military used weapons against the objects. I am in constant contact with the President and the Minister of Defense.
At the same time, the country's defense minister emphasized that during the repulsion of the attack, they maintained communication with NATO. As a result, it became known that Alliance and Dutch aircraft helped destroy the drones. As a result of today's attack by the Russian Federation on the territory of Ukraine, there was an unprecedented violation of Polish airspace by drone-type objects. This is an act of aggression that created a real threat to the safety of our citizens. Breaking news! The first drone was found in the Lublin voivodeship after the attack by Russian drones. At 5:40 a.m. in the city of Chosnovka, the police confirmed the discovery of a damaged drone. We have informed the relevant authorities. The investigation is ongoing. It was also reported that as a result of the attack, a residential building in a city near Lublin was damaged. A local government official confirmed that no one was injured in the incident, but there was material damage. District representatives are at the scene to assess the damage. And on top of that, there's real chaos. The operations of 4 airports were halted at once. The Chopin International Airport in Warsaw, as well as Warsaw-Modlin. Rzeszów-Jasionka, the airport closest to the Ukrainian border, and the airport in Lublin. Moreover, due to the drone attack, the authorities have convened an emergency government meeting. An accelerated call-up of territorial defense reservists has already been announced in the country. WAT soldiers may receive a summons for immediate appearance within 6 hours in such voivodeships as Podlaski, Mazowiecki, Lublin, and Subcarpathian, up to 12 hours in such voivodeships as Pomeranian, Warmian, Masurian, Kujawian, Pomeranian, and Łódź, Świętokrzyskie, and Lesser Poland as well. Official statements have also started pouring in. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio reported that he had received information about Russian drones on Polish territory. Republican Congressman Joe Wilson directly called the Shahed drone attack an act of war. At the same time, U.S. President Donald Trump simply refused to comment on the situation. Europe has also taken drastic measures. Poland will receive tens of billions of euros from the EU for defense. Poland will receive 43.7 billion euros as part of a European Union program to strengthen its defense capabilities, the Deputy Prime Minister said on Tuesday, as Warsaw is expanding its armed forces due to what it sees as a growing threat from Russia. Ukraine has not stood aside either. President Volodymyr Zelensky called on the world not to ignore Russia's provocations.
Another step toward escalation. Russian Iranian Shaheds operated in Polish airspace, in NATO airspace. Not just one Shahed, which could be called an accident, but at least 8 attack drones that were directed toward Poland. An extremely dangerous precedent for Europe.
Tensions are rising, and all this is happening against the backdrop of threats from Belarusian territory. Now the border is locked down. On the eve of the mega attack, Donald Tusk announced that this week Poland is closing its border with Belarus ahead of upcoming exercises. Zapad 2025.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
For reasons of national security in connection with the Zapad exercises, we will close the border with Belarus.
According to Tusk, all border crossings with Belarus will be closed, including railway crossings. The Prime Minister emphasized that the military exercises organized by Moscow and Minsk are aimed at NATO's sensitive security zone.
Such maneuvers have one goal: the Suwałki corridor.
Meanwhile, Putin's army in the Barents Sea is practicing strikes against NATO and deploying Iskander missile launchers just a few kilometers from the borders of the North Atlantic Alliance. What will come of this saber rattling? Find out next.
The attack by Russian drones on Poland and the Zapad 2025 military exercises in Belarus are a rehearsal for an assault on NATO's eastern flank.
During the exercises in Belarus, the Russian Federation is practicing the capture of the Suwałki corridor, according to Bild.
Russia does not even try to hide its goals and objectives. In Kaliningrad, Russia is making a show of force in broad daylight and on busy roads, deploys Iskander systems, while the Ministry of Defense of the aggressor country reports daily on successful training and combat missile and bomb strikes using aviation and the Navy against the territory of the North Atlantic Alliance.
The crews of MiG-31 aircraft equipped with the Kinjal aviation complex conducted a flight over the neutral waters of the Barents Sea as part of the Joint Strategic Exercise West 2025. During the training and combat mission, the crews practiced delivering a simulated airstrike on the enemy's critically important targets.
In response, NATO is strengthening its military capabilities in countries neighboring Russia. According to Polish media reports, the Eastern Sentinel mission, announced the day before by Mark Rutte, has already begun.
The Polish General Staff has published footage of a French A-400 transport aircraft landing in Minsk Mazowiecki. It delivered weaponry for Rafale fighter jets, which, as it turns out, are already in Poland.
As part of the mission, countries from Western and Northern Europe are strengthening the military technical capabilities of those nations most vulnerable to the Russian threat.
Denmark, France, Britain, and Germany in particular will be involved in these activities. This is quite telling. In other words, this is about the practical application of the fifth article of the NATO statute, namely collective security. On the territory of both Poland and the Baltic states, there is a redeployment of units from both the armed forces of these countries and, accordingly, NATO member states. First and foremost, this concerns strengthening land borders to prevent possible provocations.
The protection of the eastern skies is also being reinforced. France, Britain, and Germany are deploying Rafale and Eurofighter jets, as well as additional air defense systems, to countries bordering Russia.
Any inaction, of course, is a clear display of weakness, which absolutely encourages the Russian Federation and other aggressive nations in the future to openly violate those, let's say, boundaries. The architectures that were built in the Yalta-Potsdam world, which the United States is now trying to maintain.
Now the question is whether the US will support Europe. After Donald Trump's vague response, European politicians began to doubt Washington's willingness to actually defend NATO's borders.
What is your reaction to the drone incursion into Poland? It could have been a mistake. It might have been a mistake. But regardless of that, I am not happy about anything related to this situation. But I hope it will end.
The Kremlin is watching the response from Europe and the US. Weakness and ignoring the problem will be an invitation for Putin to move from rehearsals to a real attack.
The Suwałki corridor is NATO's most vulnerable spot, and in the near future, Putin may try to invade this Achilles heel.
We are observing a significantly increased Russian military presence in the regions of Kaliningrad and Belarus. Furthermore, we are witnessing sudden large-scale military exercises and unusual troop movements across the border. We are facing a hybrid war with GPS jamming, sabotage of underwater vessels, and little green men stirring up unrest among Russian-speaking minorities.
We're talking about the so-called Suwałki corridor, about 100 kilometers long, which connects Poland and the Baltic states. Military analysts often describe this place as the most dangerous zone in NATO. If Russia and Belarus seize this corridor, they will cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from their European NATO allies.
Anything that resembles a large-scale military buildup on the border with Ukraine right before the 2022 war should be interpreted as a serious warning sign. The movement of fuel, vehicles, and other military assets can serve as an indication of an impending invasion.
The Zapad 2025 military exercises, which Russia and Belarus will jointly conduct from September 12th to 16th, will partly take place near the borders with Poland and Lithuania.
We must take exercises near the borders of NATO and the EU seriously. Both neighboring countries and NATO itself are treating them with the utmost seriousness. Lithuania and our allies are prepared, united, and closely monitoring developments, ready to respond if necessary.
Military experts are urging close monitoring of these exercises, while NATO countries bordering Russia are conducting their own military drills during the same period. In the Terrasis exercises, 10 northern European NATO countries are participating, while Lithuania is conducting its own national defense exercise, Thunderstrike. Poland is holding its own exercise, Iron Defender 25, which has brought together 30,000 military personnel.
We need to set challenging tasks for our troops and make them think outside the box. It's not just about getting to the exercise site and setting up camp. We need real challenges. Russia knows that if we are fully armed and ready for battle, they will definitely lose. So we won't be given the easiest conditions. We'll have to operate under pressure.
The Suwałki corridor is the only land route for NATO forces to reach Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It is considered the Achilles heel of the alliance due to its limited military capability compared to other NATO members. The Kaliningrad region and the Suwałki corridor are seen as potentially dangerous zones, since these are the routes through which Russia could try to block the Baltic states, by sea on one side and by land on the other. It is possible that Moscow will use the Zapad 2025 exercises to test NATO's response to provocations. Moscow is ramping up the mobilization of the Russian population and economy, and this is evidence that the aggressor country is preparing for a possible war. With NATO and the Suwałki corridor is the most likely place for the confrontation to begin.
New threats and accusations. The Russian dictator is preparing for yet another war.
Russia has always achieved results and has always emerged victorious from even the most difficult trials.
Well, not always, to be exact. But for now, let's not recall the achievements of the great Russian army. In the past few days, Putin's servants have been making statements about a possible war. The former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev has decided that Finland is preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia. It seems they're preparing a springboard for an attack on us. Listen.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly by law deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II. He claims that back then they paid too little, thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
Just more nonsense from the Kremlin alcoholic Medvedev, who likes to reinterpret history, just as Russia in general likes to rewrite it. If we talk specifically about any reparations, then between Soviet Russia and Finland after World War II, there were repeated consultations during which the term Finlandization emerged, where the Soviet Union did not demand any territorial concessions or reparations from Finland, and in return received a promise that Finland would not join NATO. But obviously the situation has changed over time.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. According to him, Helsinki's actions are allegedly extremely irresponsible, and the country's leadership is turning Finland into a hotbed of fascism.
Finland is pursuing an extremely irresponsible policy, guided above all by others. And in actual fact, it is truly becoming a very dangerous hotbed of extreme fascism, even more rapidly and significantly faster than Ukraine. I am very sorry to hear that these innocent people, who have truly endured so much hardship and suffering, do not deserve the terrible fate and the unfortunate situation they are currently in right now.
Kartapolov also stated, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment, since they have everything they need. Medvedev has also spoken about this before.
We cannot ignore the fact that Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This predetermines changes in our military approaches to securing the border and to repelling possible unfriendly acts.
If we recall the well-known phrase often attributed to Churchill that the fascists of the future will call themselves anti-fascists, then Russians are vividly emphasizing the current ideology of their state by running around accusing everyone left and right of allegedly supporting Nazi or fascist ideas. Of course, there are no concrete facts behind these accusations, but this kind of hybrid psychological aggression against Finland, against Poland, against the Baltic states is yet another confirmation of the long-term plans of the Russian Federation. They have no intention of stopping at Ukraine. And much of Putin's plan is about restoring the Soviet Union's influence over Eastern and Northeastern Europe.
These statements show that Moscow is sharply escalating its aggressive rhetoric against Finland, the new NATO country. And all the accusations directed at it are a continuation of the Kremlin's well-known tactic of attributing aggressive intentions to its neighbors, thereby justifying its own militarization.
If the Finns do not respond proactively to various kinds of provocations, if the Finns let the Russians get away with hybrid attacks and information psychological operations, or perhaps in the future, Finland may face similar cases to what we are seeing today with Poland, specifically with the significant incursion of a very large number of unmanned aerial vehicles, which can only be accurately described as a meticulously planned and deliberate operation, the Russians will also undoubtedly attempt physical, concrete and overt operations on the ground in order to seize and occupy Finnish territory.
Russia has long been building up its forces at the Finnish border. New tents, shelters for fighter jets and warehouses are being constructed. In this way, the Kremlin is gradually preparing the ground for putting pressure on Finland.
Russia has become such a nuisance that even Scandinavia couldn't take it anymore and is now arming itself to the teeth. Denmark is purchasing missiles and drones for deep strikes. These are historic records for military spending. Missiles and drones are ready to launch. Copenhagen is ready to strike. All the details coming up right now.
Denmark will purchase long-range missiles and drones due to the threat from Russia. This was announced by the country's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen. Denmark's Defense Minister Troels Lund Poulsen noted that with these new resources, the armed forces will be able to actively counter threats far from their own country. According to Poulsen, the experience of the war in Ukraine has shown that it is important not only to build a layered air defense, but also to have the means to strike targets on enemy territory, including missile launchers.
Denmark is unlikely to be able to defend itself from Russia on its own, which is why Denmark is one of the key members of the North Atlantic Alliance, the so-called NATO bloc. Over the past 30 years, the European members of NATO have seriously disarmed. In Europe, there was a prevailing belief in protection from the United States. With Trump's arrival in the White House, it turned out that this was not entirely the case.
According to the Commander-in-Chief of the Danish Army, General Michael Weiger's Guard, high-precision long-range weapons will allow the military to counter threats before they reach their territory.
The Danes are also very much interested in actively acquiring and deploying advanced missile systems with an impressive range of more than 600 kilometers, a significant capability indeed. More than 600 kilometers, that is exceeding the range of short tactical range.
Russia's ambassador to Copenhagen, Vladimir Barbin, responded immediately to Denmark's statement. According to him, no one, anywhere, at any time in the world has ever even thought of publicly threatening a nuclear power. And now Russia must proceed from the fact that Denmark is not only considering the possibility of a direct military confrontation with it, but is also preparing for such a scenario.
Russia is demonstrating, and in fact their goal was to demonstrate the lack of unity within NATO. The North Atlantic Alliance to sow discord among the member states of the alliance, to break apart and destroy the European security system. They are succeeding at this. They succeed in their objectives by employing rather simple at first glance methods and tactics, making it exceedingly difficult to definitively prove Russia's direct and undeniable guilt in these complex situations, which often involve intricate layers of plausible deniability. If one chooses not to see it, it becomes very hard to recognize. Nevertheless, Europeans are already seeing the aggressive nature of the Russian Federation. And while they have not yet accepted that war with Russia, if not inevitable, is quite possible. Moreover, in the near future.
Prime Minister Frederiksen responded to the statement of the Russian ambassador by saying that it would not affect Denmark's decision in any way and that her country would not allow itself to be intimidated by Russia.
And what do you think about such bold actions by Russia? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more, keep up with the main news, and hit the like button below the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above.